joining us tonight. We have another great parent education session today with Kinecta Wealth Management. And we have here with us Sean Tompkins. And today we're going to be talking about raising financially aware kids. And we're just so excited to partner with Kinecta with the Palos Verdes Unified School District. So Sean, you ready? Take it away.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Welcome to our webinar, Raising Financially Aware Kids, Understanding the Value of a Dollar from Toddler to Teen. I know you guys probably are pretty busy with the holidays approaching, so we appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your evening to join us today. There's a few housekeeping things to go over before we get started. The first is this webinar is being recorded. The chat feature has been disabled on the Zoom for compliance reasons, and the webinar will be available on the Kinecta Wealth Management YouTube for up to 5 days after we conclude our webinar tonight. Last thing, is to please save all your questions towards the end. We will have plenty of time to answer each one of your questions. There is a raise your hand button on the bottom of the Zoom. So once we finish our presentation tonight, you can click your raise the hand icon and we'll unmute you so you're able to ask your questions one at a time. All right, so let's get started. We all spend a great deal of time and energy helping our kids with schoolwork, spelling test drills, times tables, and state capitals. But there's one thing that or one subject I should say, that typically isn't taught in school, and that's personal finance. Whether or not we want to admit it, our kids look to us for guidance in shaping their personal financial habits. Typically, it's our personal past experiences that shape the ways that we take action in the future. Typically, it's a good idea if you use your own stories to your advantage when talking to your kids about how you grew up, telling your kids about what your financial situation was when you were growing up, telling them about what your living situation was, what activities you did, and what needs were met and weren't met during your childhood. Then explain how these experiences shape the way that you think about money today. More U.S. parents worry about having enough money to pay for their children's college education than other Americans worry about any common financial concerns. I can definitely understand that with college costs continuing to increase, it's no surprise that parents are concerned. More than 68% of U.S. high school students are concerned about their ability to pay back future student loans. 71% of students today considered costs as an influence in deciding if they wanted to attend college at all. And 83% of students weighed cost as a factor in which college they would choose. This is why it's so important for parents to educate kids about real-world finance. Maybe your student will be more open to attending a different school than their dream school, or maybe one that's a little bit less expensive if they understand the effect of having to pay back those student loans on their budget once they graduate. I know personally when it came time to apply for colleges, all I cared about is, oh, I got into my dream school. Yeah, I knew how much college costs and I knew I'd have student loan payments when I graduated, but it wasn't actually until I graduated and had to start paying back that monthly payment that it was quite the rude awakening. 64% of teens today depend on parents or caregivers for information on how to manage their money. More than a third of teenagers, or kids I should say, don't believe they'll be financially independent by age 30. Looking back to when I was in high school, trying to figure out what I want to do for a living, it was so helpful that my parents sat down with me and we discussed what potential incomes and opportunities that I might have with various jobs I was thinking about. Too many times I see kids continue to be dependent on their parents after college because they chose a major that didn't have a very high earning potential. Typically, by 4 to 5 years of age, children understand that they need to pay for merchandise, but they may not understand that coins have different values. It's pretty amazing that kids can grasp concepts at such a young age. In our time together this evening, we'll go through several topics. First, we're going to go through values around money, an important fundamental that draws from many influences, especially parents. Next, teaching kids about earning, whether that's a small allowance for young children or a part-time job for teens. Oops, sorry about that. Next, we're going to talk about saving and investing, what it means for liquidity and growth. Then budgeting and borrowing and how they work together. And last, we're going to talk about giving back and how philanthropy can be a lifelong endeavor. But the number one thing you should take away from tonight's presentation, if nothing else, is how important it is to talk to your kids about money. It can have a huge or a profound impact on them and then influence their decisions throughout life. As the earlier statistic from Junior Achievement showed us, kids are looking to their parents for thoughts and guidance around money. How we spend our dollars reflects values. It's not a right or a wrong, but our values definitely influence where we use our discretionary funds, which can change depending on what our personal circumstances are at that time. It starts with the basic discussion around needs and wants. This principle affects our decisions from such an early point in life. Little ones need something to play with, but they always want the latest toy. Typically, they see it on TV. Teens need shoes, but they might want the latest cool shoes or the newest Air Jordans they saw on TikTok. It's about modeling how to live within your means and helping your kids recognize the difference between what they want and what they really need. A good example is next time you're in the market for a new car, maybe take your kids along to the dealership or include them in the discussion with your spouse about what car you're looking at and why you're looking at that. Everyone needs a safe and reliable car, but anything beyond that is considered a want. If you have young kids, there's always a great book. I don't know if you guys have seen it before or heard of it. It's called Alexander Who Used to Be Rich Last Sunday. It's by Judith Viorst, and it's a great story about a little boy who whittles away $1 on things that he thinks that he needs. Let's put some context onto what teenagers actually want these days. This slide is a fall 2019 study on where teens spend their money the most. Clearly, this slide shows that brands matter to teens, which is why advertisers target teenagers known as Gen Z. What's not shown on the slide is food is increasingly viewed as an entertainment choice these days. Chick-fil-A is rated #1 according to the same study, which isn't too surprising. I don't know about you, but it seems like there's a new Chick-fil-A popping up on every corner these days. There's 5 key concepts that kids need to understand about money, and we can teach them each one of them. According to Merriam-Webster, money is something generally accepted as a medium of exchange, a measure of value, or a means of payment. It's important to help your kids understand that money is for exchanging. Bartering is kind of a prelude to that. It's a pretty easy concept for kids to understand. I know that in my house, I have 2 little kids, and they like to play with their fake food truck in our living room. My younger son's 2. He doesn't quite understand what money is, but he definitely expects something in exchange for the plastic tacos that he cooks for me every night. The second key thing is what do things cost? Kids at all ages should understand generally that different costs are associated with different things. I know you might cringe at me saying this, but next time you go to the grocery store, maybe bring your kid along. Let them see how much things really cost and do some comparison shopping. Let them see how expensive that box of Cheerios costs or their favorite Fruit Loops. When summer rolls around, you could also, when it comes time to deciding on which camps to enroll in, whether it be soccer camp or science camp, explain to them how much each one of those camp costs and say, hey, look, soccer camp costs $500. Maybe this month you can't do soccer camp and karate. That way they have a better understanding that the things they like to do have different costs and they have to make a choice sometimes. The third thing, what is something worth? Along with what things cost, kids need to understand it or what the idea of worth is. Making them give up something or choose between something is a great way to demonstrate what something's worth is. Kids can comprehend the idea of scope and size from a pretty early age. Typically, as toddlers, it starts with blocks and shapes. When we talk about the cost of something, the ideas of value and worth can easily be expressed in terms of what they provide us. For example, let's take a pair of gloves. They may cost $10, but they provide great value in keeping our hands warm and preventing frostbite. Ultimately, these lead to choices. For older kids, maybe when it's time to think about a family vacation, you can include them in the choices and say, hey, look, we can either go to this destination for 10 days or we can go to this other one for 5. They both cost the same thing, but you guys decide which might provide our family a better time or a better experience. The fourth thing, or the fourth factor, is what is opportunity cost? Opportunity cost pertains to all the alternative options we give up every time we make a decision. A great example is if your kids go to the movies with their friends, then they can't go to the birthday party happening at the same time. Part of the cost of going to the movies is not going to the birthday party. Older kids might experience this lesson with their own money. For an example, maybe they do babysitting on the side. So instead of babysitting and earning $40 one Friday night, they decide to go spend $70 to go to a concert with friends. So in reality, the true cost of the concert is $110. It's the $70 they spent to go to the concert plus the $40 that they missed out on babysitting that night. The last idea is simply around using the experiences and tools available. For little kids, it might be a piggy bank. For older kids, it's a savings account or an investment account or even a retirement account as they start to earn income. Use every one of these opportunities to involve kids in making choices, helping them decide either this or that. What I found is most parents typically lecture their kids about saving, for an example, but a better idea might be to sit down with their kids and Google on the internet investment savings calculator. And it's pretty cool because you can go in there and you can manipulate the variables. And for an example, if you showed them if they added $100 a month to their investment account and over a 30-year time period, that account value would be almost $100,000 potentially. I think that would be a lot more motivation to cement strong savings habits than just mom or dad telling them that saving is a good idea. Definitely check that out. Our next discussion is around earning. First, we need to explain what income is. Explain that most adults have a job that pays them money for the work that they do. And this is what they use to buy things. Some people earn an hourly wage. Some people earn a set amount of money for no matter how many hours they work. That's obviously a salary. All types of jobs have different skill or education requirements, but a job overall is what provides the income. So now we're kind of move on to allowance. $30 a week is the average amount a week in allowance for kids these days. $6.11 an hour is the average amount earned per hour of chores, which has gone up quite a bit since 2016, as you can see. And 2/3 of parents typically give their kids allowance. It's important to consider what your own values are around allowance. There's typically two kind of viewpoints on allowance. Some parents believe allowances should be given without expectations. So there's no expectation of chores being completed or school grades being maintained. They suggest that children should strive to meet these expectations just by being members of the family, regardless of whether or not an allowance is being given. On the other hand, other parents believe that an allowance should be compensation for the work that they did. So children don't get stuck in that entitlement mentality. Under this philosophy, expectations should be clearly set about what work needs to be completed, the quality that's expected, and within what time frame before the allowance will be paid to your child. This experience or this thought process mirrors more job-like situations in which your child will find themselves later on in life. Bottom line is it's about learning. Obviously, kids are going to make mistakes. That's part of the process. but it's better that they make those mistakes now when the consequences are relatively small, rather than when things really count when they're in the workforce. So around these days, the average annual wage is just over $4,900 for kids 15 to 17 years old, and kids 12 to 14 are making about $2,700. So when it comes to earning, I mean, it's important to talk to your kids about how you earn money, about what your job is. Once your kids are of age, typically in high school, encourage your kids to get a part-time job. Encourage them to gain experience, especially through internships. Internships are a great way to kind of get their feet wet and figure out what they want to do once they enter the workforce. And it's important to praise your kids for the hard work that they did rather than the money that they earned. Also, keeping track of their work experience is important. That way, when it comes time to build their resume, they'll have a strong foot to put forward to enter the workforce. I know it's hard these days since COVID has changed a lot, but if you are going to the office and your work has a take your kid to work day, let your kids come in and shadow you for a day and see how things work. Or if that's not an option, maybe a friend or relative can bring your child to work for a day. Let's move on to what happens after kids have some money. That would be saving and investing. There's 3 basic rules of saving. The first one is save every time. The second is save 10 to 20%, and then you just have to do it. Teaching kids to pay themselves first is a great way to get them to save more money. For older kids or teenagers, rather than putting away whatever's left after they do all the fun stuff, show them how to create a rough budget and figure out what their expenses might be for the month. And then when they get paid, have them put money in the savings account before they do the fun stuff. That way, that's what I found to be one of the more effective habits to start to build savings over time. For younger kids, you have to make saving fun. I mean, kids can decorate clear containers, one for saving, one for spending, and one for giving. Have them save for something special. Have them make a wish list. Choose a small goal and save towards that goal. You could show them the money. Give your kids small denominations when you give them money, and make a savings goal chart that they can hang on the wall. And as they save more to reach that goal or that object they're saving for. And last, consider sweetening the deal. Kind of like your 401k where a company gives you a match. Consider offering your kids a saving match. If they're working hard and showing good savings habits, maybe you kick in a little bit, or you pay interest on money that they're saving in their piggy bank. Once your kids are a little bit older, maybe in middle school or high school, and it comes time they've outgrown the piggy bank, that's when you're going to want to introduce your child to banking. Do a little bit of research online, or take your kids on a tour of various credit unions or financial institutions. But I'd recommend before you doing that, sit down with them and help them create a list of questions that they should ask once they go to the credit union or financial institution. Once you get that bank account opened up, it's important to show your kids how a deposit slip works and make a deposit. I know that's becoming less and less prevalent with everything moving digitally and online apps, but it's still important to know how it works. A lot of times people don't realize that when they deposit their check in the credit union or the bank, that it gets put on hold and your money might not be available right away. So teach your kids kind of the process that you've experienced depositing your paychecks. Teach your kids the different parts of a check, where they find their account number, where the routing number is, how to fill out the check. This one kind of goes back to your money might not be available right away. If you write a check and the money's not there, then what does it mean to bounce a check? Show your kids that checks take time to go through the system, so they need to keep track of their purchases to make sure the funds are still there. This one goes back to deposit slips, and not too many people use a check register these days, but show them how to keep track of their purchases and maintain their balance by using the online app if they don't have a check register. When your child opens up a savings account, they typically get a debit card. So you're going to want to show them the importance of tracking the purchases, and the transactions might take a couple of days to show up on their statement or their online app. Also, you want to caution them about who they provide their card information to, especially with all the fraud these days. Once they get that card, you're going to want to watch them do their first couple ATM transactions, explain to them that the PIN is their private code, and to safeguard that, to prevent fraud and that kind of stuff. And then also go over with them how ATMs work as far as the networks and the fees. It might be a good idea, probably the best idea, is to include this stuff with the list of questions that you help them create before they come into the credit union or the bank. That way you won't forget or they won't forget, and the credit union banker employee can go over all this stuff with them in good detail. So along with opening a savings account, part of saving for the future is growing your money through investing. I know in high school, at least when I was in high school, all the kids took part in the stock market game, which is where either you or your team picks a portfolio of stocks to put in your account. And then as a class, you track everyone's portfolio, and whoever's account is worth the most at the end of the semester or whatever time period wins the game. But they do have these programs for free online. So it's extremely beneficial for your younger kids before high school to teach them about investing. Maybe download that stock market game and help them pick a couple of stocks to keep track of. Along with stocks, if you do have some investment experience, you can explain what mutual funds are, and that mutual funds give investors a more broad access to a group of stocks or stocks or investments that are professionally managed. And the last, you want to make sure that your kids have a goal set up before they invest any money. Accounts or investment accounts fluctuate in the short term with the market, but they typically grow over the long term. The idea of risk and return translates across many things. If your child wants to play sports, for example, there's always a risk in trying out for the team. Kind of similar in investing. The greater the risk, the greater potential of reward. But there's always a chance that the more risk they take, the higher the chances are that their account could go down in value in the short term. Going back to the stock market game we just talked about, can really illustrate that. If they pick a couple of, let's say, growth tech stocks that were up 30% last year, could go down 30% this year, and they take a group of stocks that are more well-established blue chip companies, they're not going to see huge returns on those stocks, but they're also not going to fluctuate nearly as much. So that really illustrates the risk and return trade-off that this graph is trying to show us. The best time to save and invest for college is as soon as possible. 529 plans are a great tax advantage way to save for future education expenses. This graph or this slide illustrates the importance of starting early. You can see just by investing $25 a month from when they were a newborn, they'd have almost $9,000 by the time that they were 18. But if you waited till they were 10, that same $25 a month only grew to, let's say, $3,000. So the effect of market growth and compounding, time really is your friend. The nice part about 529 accounts is they can be used for any accredited institution after high school. They just changed the rules recently, so now you can also use the funds for K through 12 at the $10,000 per year. If you do use those funds for qualified education expenses, all the gains in the account are tax-free. So 529s are really a great option that should be explored as soon as possible. They're also very convenient. 529s are typically invested in mutual funds, so it gives you access to professional portfolio management, and you can link a bank account and make it really easy on yourselves, where you can set up where you have that 25 bucks a month or 100 bucks a month deducted every month automatically ACH. I know with my kids, it's gotten to the point where when birthdays and holidays roll around, the last thing we want is more toys. I can't find a place for the ones that we do have. So rather than getting more toys from family members and friends, you can have them make a gift to your kid's 529 account, which will go a lot farther in the future than the latest toy out right now. So let's move on, and we're going to talk about budgeting and borrowing right now. Elementary and middle school kids can follow a budget for lunch, whether they bring their lunch or buy their lunch. They can also, or you can also move to clothing allowance as well to bring home the idea of budgeting. Good idea is, or some parents say, okay, I'll pay X dollars amount for a new pair of shoes. If you want something more expensive, then you have to pay the difference. So depending on your circumstances, you can decide what, if any, kind of rules you want to set about that. I know with older kids, that really cars come into that equation. I know when I was in high school, my parents, I had to maintain a certain GPA to have my car, and my parents paid for my insurance, but it was up to me by working my part-time job that I paid for my gas and my routine car maintenance. And if I wanted to do any upgrades, that was on me too. For older kids, I suggest making them write down their budget or use an app, which is more common these days. Many times, kids and people of all ages, they really underestimate their spending habits if they don't write it down so they can actually see what they spend. You'd be quite surprised how much money you actually spend on eating out if you went back and looked at your credit card statement at the end of every month. If you're comfortable, I mean, I know not everyone is, but if you are, share parts of your own budget with your kids and let them see how you write things down and what your income goes to and what bills you have. I think that's the best way to influence strong savings, investing, and budgeting habits on your kids is to lead by example. So building credit is one of the more important ones. Teach your kids that their credit score is like their report card and their FICO score is their GPA. So credit scores range between 300 and 850, and the higher the score, the better your credit and the lower interest rates that you can get in the future. So really try to emphasize to your kids that positive behaviors like paying your bill on time, not having too many credit cards open, etc., lead to higher scores, and negative behaviors like missing a credit card payment or maxing out your card lead to lower credit scores. Try to explain that the better financial decisions they make now when it comes time to building credit will benefit them in the future when they borrow money through lower interest rates, which will allow them to have more excess or discretionary funds for the fun stuff. Consider getting your teenager a student credit card or secured credit card where they can start building their credit and good borrowing habits. It's important also to let show your kids that credit cards are for building credit, and show them it's not a free-for-all to go buy things they can't afford and run up a big balance. So there's 10 main things to know about credit. The first one is start building credit before you need it. Start small, and that's where that student credit card or that secured credit card comes in that has a pretty small credit limit where you can't, or your child can't get themselves into too much trouble. Communicate with your lenders is number 3. The fourth one, which is important, is keep your credit cards to 30% utilization or less, and pay off the balance in a timely fashion. Pay on time every time, and have a good credit account mix. So along with credit cards, maybe if they have a car payment or a student loan payment. So having a good mix of credit is always a good thing for your credit score. Be cautious when closing credit card accounts. That goes back to the utilization ratio. And then take your credit seriously. The 9th one is don't open multiple accounts at once, no matter what goodies or freebies are offering at the table when you walk by. And then keep an eye on your credit score. Check your credit regularly to make sure that there's no suspicious activity or fraud on your credit. The student loans are one of the biggest budget expenditures weighing down young adults today. It's important to include your student in financial conversations about going to college, what you as parents can afford. Many times, like I said before, kids only care about getting into their dream school or certain schools, regardless of cost, because they don't really know what mom and dad's financial picture looks like, and they haven't had the experience to know how much a large monthly payment can bog down once it comes time to repaying that loan. So I recommend sitting down with your kids and have them work through the FAFSA application with you. Show them how much in loans they'd be expected to take out if they went to USC or UCLA or whatever school they choose. I mean, how much that student loan payment would be when they graduated. I would encourage your kids to take out as little loans as possible and really try to drive home that it's not free money, and eventually they're going to have to pay it back. And so the decisions they make now have a lifelong effect on their finances, especially when it comes time to get married and buy a house and that kind of stuff. So the last topic we're going to cover tonight is giving back. Leading by example is probably the best way to encourage kids to give back to the community. A few ideas to spark interest in giving back are having kids set up or set aside a give bucket along with their save and spend buckets. Maybe volunteer as a family. So on Thanksgiving, go to a food bank and give out turkey dinner or stuff, backpacks for back to school, that kind of stuff. Ask for donations rather than gifts at birthday parties. So maybe going back to, we have too many toys. So, hey family, can you provide or bring donations, canned goods, so we can drop them off at the food bank, that kind of stuff. And then once your kids are in high school and college, encourage them to continue volunteering in high school and college, because that just builds lifelong habits to continue volunteering throughout their life. So it's a long journey with our kids, and teaching them to be financially aware is not setting a goal so much to grow up to be rich and famous. We want to give our kids the tools to make thoughtful choices about how they earn, how they consume, how they invest, how they give their dollars. There's going to be ups and downs, but these are good lessons to learn. So we went over quite a few topics today. I cover the Kinecta branches in Palos Verdes and Torrance on PCH. And I invite each of you guys or all of you guys to use me as a resource if you want to dive deeper into any of these topics, or you want to sit down with your child and talk about investing or banking or college planning, whatever it may be. I'm always available.